Hello everybody, welcome back to another Walking Dead video, and today we'll be talking about Tales of the Walking Dead Season 1, and I want to kind of do some rewrites for each episode of Tales of the Walking Dead, and kind of fix the issues I had with each episode. I do have some limitations, as I do with my rewrite series, like, I can't just completely do a whole different story. I have to keep somewhat relevant to the story we got. It's just more of me looking at the faults and kind of adding things which I thought would make the episode better and make it go from either a bad episode to an okay episode, or from an okay episode to a good episode. So let's jump right into this and actually talk about episode 1. And I think this is one of the better episodes of the season, but one issue I have is the pacing, the start and the ending. So straight up, how I would fix this episode is this episode would start with not only a montage of Joe, but it will also start with a montage of Eve. So we would have both of these characters be introduced at more at the same time, and have both of them going through their day-to-day lives up until the traumatic moments of both of their lives, where they then had to go and meet each other. So we don't end up having the issue if we just meet Eve suddenly like 20 minutes or 10 minutes into the episode. No, we meet Joe and we have his tragic moment just like in the show, but we then have a sub-story where it flicks over to Eve in between meeting all the scenes we get of Joe, and it would be about Eve with her partner and them having their routine, and her moment where her and her partner have an argument, he runs off into the woods and stuff like that, and her motivation is to go and find him, like kinda in the show, and that leads to Joe and Eve find each other while they both go off on their quest for love. The episode more or less the same up until the ending, and this is where the difference happens, is once Joe gets to the bunker, he finds that it's been more or less left open, so to think, and when he goes in to try and find his prepper friend, she's not there but a couple of other people, a small group, and this is when he gets captured, and the episode would then focus on Eve trying to get Joe back. She goes down there, ends up having a fight, Joe gets freed, and it's about those two having a fight together, so Joe actually does something, and it's more comedic value as Joe's trying to fight while high and saving the goat, and they go out of their way to go save the goat, and the episode ends after more of a big fight. Instead of just Eve taking out the single woman, it's Eve and Joe deciding that they need each other, and they use their collective kind of knowledge and skills to take out this other group by working as a team. And then once they escape, the episode is more or less the same, and ends the same with Eve and Joe teaming up and going off to fight the world together. Episode 2 is an episode that I actually wouldn't change that much of. I think the pacing's very good. Even in the previous episode, I would say it needed to be longer. This episode, I think, is just the right length. And the way I would rewrite this episode, it was I'll have it be basically all the same. With Blair going to the explosion, everything's the same, up until the final bit. And that's when the group actually managed to team up. They work together, they kill a bunch of walkers, and then they blow up. Then, instead of the characters walking off into the sunset exploded, it then cuts back to Blair at the start from the first explosion, and we find out this is actually all going for her head while she is dying. And this is all Blair's imagination, and the entire episode has just been a dream, basically. None of it is real. There's no Groundhog Day magic. It is just Blair's mind shooting off as much like neurons and stuff just before she died, and thinking about all the other ways she could have got out of that situation. Then the episode ends with Blair dying from the explosion at the start of the episode. Now, episode 3, this is the Alpha Origin / Whisper Origin episode, and for my rewrites, this episode will start basically the same with Alpha and Lydia on the boat, and it'd be more or less the same up until the point where we have the people attack the boat, and Alpha and Lydia manage to escape like normal, but the rest of the episode has the group from the boat trying to hunt down Alpha and Lydia. And the episode focuses on Alpha going to extreme lengths just to try and avoid these people and keep Lydia alive, even though Lydia keeps putting her in jeopardy. Throughout the second half of this episode, Lydia keeps running off and talking about the fairies in the tree, and talking about hearing talking within the trees and hearing noises. This leads to the big moment where Alpha actually gets caught by all these people just because Lydia keeps running off and keeps putting them in worse and worse danger. This leads to Lydia and Alpha being captured, and these guys finally catching up to Lydia and Alpha. And just before they manage to kill off Lydia and Alpha, they start hearing whispering from the trees, and it gets louder and louder. And then these people, this big group, comes out from the trees covered in guts and takes out all of these men. And then the episode ends, much like in the show, with this community, these proto-whisperers. They don't have the masks yet, they're just covered in zombie guts. Offers Alpha and Lydia a place within their group. Now moving on to episode 4, and this episode will start with Amy outside of the dead zone, outside of the trench that we see in the episode. And this is the 35 years later episode, other side this one is. And in this, the episode starts off with Amy and a bunch of headhunters trying to sneak into the dead zone so they can get Walker heads to sell. There's no colonization idea, they're just going in there because they want to get Walkers to make a profit. However, once they are in, a Walker horde comes in and Amy gets separated from her group. We then have, like we do in the show, where the Walkers end up catching up to Amy and she almost gets bit until the doctor saves her, risking Subject 21. Amy, however, got bit in all this chaos, and we then have to have the doctor do a quick amputation, and like in the show, Amy has to recover at his laboratory. Once she's fully recovered and now has this metal arm, the doctor then quickly enrolls her in this now rescue mission for Sub 21, and the story is basically those two going out together straight away to go find the subject, then bonding over the things. Amy lying to the doctor saying she's a colonist, that's why she's there, she's not a headhunter, and it leads to very much the same. However, this episode is more about exploring the Walkers 35 years in, and how Amy barely has seen them before, she's very new to them, but the doctor isn't, as he's lived there for a really long time. We also get a lot of looks at different variants, as this is kind of a big collection of a bunch of herds being pushed into one area by society reforming. A bunch of Walkers from very different parts of America and the world have kind of been pushed into this one area. We have this episode focus on, we get kind of different types of Walkers. We have some runners, we have some Walkers that are very more alert and aware. Maybe the guts trick doesn't work on some of them. So the episode is more focused on Amy and the doctor having to overcome these new variant Walkers together, as there's certain parts of this dead zone the doctor doesn't go to because there are certain hordes there which maybe can smell through his Walker skin coat, so the guts trick doesn't work on them. This all leads up to the end of this episode, which is very much the same, with Amy and the doctor come across Walkers that are fighting people, the doctor holding them back, then the doctor realising she's actually a headhunter. A fight ensues between them where they argue, but that quickly is subsided by the doctor realizing Subject 21 is in a threat, and him trying to save him, like in the show, but Amy helps him realise that it's just a Walker and let it go. This episode ends with Amy about to leave, but the doctor offers her to stay and work with him. They agree, and the episode ends with those two going back to their little outpost together to continue their studies. Episode 5 is the murder mystery episode, and this is basically the same. However, this episode starts with Donovan not in the woods, but he is inside the house, chained up to a Walker and next to a dead kid that is starting to turn. This episode will start with Donovan having to remove this Walker and take out the kid. However, he gets quickly found in the basement and ends up being suspect number 1 for this murder. The episode has him immediately get captured, and we get the scenes where he's captured and trialed like in the episode. However, the rest of this episode is about him escaping and trying to figure out what happened. The episode is about him sneaking around this village while people are looking for him. The episode will also have many flashbacks like in the show, but the difference will be is that we will not just follow his perspective. There will be a second plot where we follow one of the villagers, the woman from the episode that was close to Donovan. It will follow her perspective as her kid's missing and how she is currently trying to find Donovan. So we have a cat and mouse situation where Donovan is trying to outrun her and find out what's happening while she is trying to catch up and take him down because she believes he's the murderer. The episode comes to an end where Donovan's about to get caught. However, when Donovan's in custody, another child goes missing. Donovan escapes yet again and then goes out into the woods himself to go find the killer. He finds the killer, and like in the show, it ends more or less the same with him in the fight with the killer, screaming, everyone else comes around, and the episode ends with him giving a speech, the killer being murdered, and Donovan leaving. Episode 6 is more or less the same, but with some differences. Episode 6 will be the same up to a certain point, and that is when the old lady is murdered. And then after that, the episode then focuses on both characters dealing with the grief and knowledge that they've murdered the old lady, and how they are both starting to hallucinate and starting to become paranoid. And this episode takes place over a set period of time, so it's not just in a couple of days, it's more over a couple of months. And we see how they become more reclusive and they start to avoid each other and they become more paranoid. Once we get to the end of the episode, after these two characters are starting to hallucinate and we get hauntings for both characters, they get pushed together because of a storm, and how houses is actually starting to fall apart. The breaking point of this episode is when Idalia finds out all the food that they've been eating all this time is actually contaminated, and because it's been months of them consuming this, she immediately blames her boyfriend, and that leads to a fight between the both of them as they are blaming each other. Even though the boy finds out second, he blames her to try and make it seem like he's the bad guy when it's actually her. So the episode ends with them fighting each other to the death, and they ended up both mortally wounding each other and killing each other. The episode ends with them both dying, like in the show, and we do see them both hallucinate the old lady again, but there is no supernatural thing in this episode. It is just them both eating contaminated food and suffering from cabin fever, from living inside of this small house for months and not leaving. And those are my kind of little notes and rewrites for Season 1 of Tales of the Walking Dead, how I think would improve each episode. Some of them I feel like I wouldn't improve that much, and some of them like if they just changed this and changed almost all of it, it'll be great. So please tell me down, what do you think about my little changes to each episode of Tales of the Walking Dead? Would you like them more, or do you like the original episodes with their supernatural / silly side, or just kind of nonsense side? I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions, and if you had some changes, how would you change these episodes? What would you do? Would you completely change some of these episodes which are barely changed, or would you kind of go to the episodes I've changed a lot and not change them at all? I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions and everything down below. But this is it for me today, so I'm going to leave you, and if you want more Walking Dead content, please look on the screen. I recommend you do click on any videos you see, because you will find something else you like, guaranteed. And make sure to subscribe to the channel, because it will help me out. And if you want to keep up to date with all things Walking Dead, 2 videos a week, every week, you're in the right place. But this is it for me today, so goodbye, peace out, and I'll talk to you at a later date.